I have a special guest here from BenQ, and we're going to talk about some exciting news that's coming out from BenQ. So stay tuned and find out. This is ArtIsRight. So I have the privilege of welcoming my really great friend, Dr. Chris Bai, to the studio. In fact, this is the very first time I have a guest visiting my studio, so it is a privilege to have him. And to me, I just known him as Chris, and we've just been talking a lot about color management, about all this geeky stuff. But what it really comes down to at the end of the day is Chris is BenQ Senior Color Expert, and he runs the Color Lab at BenQ. He also sits on the International Color Consortium. So if you're really looking for an expert in color, I mean, he is the person to talk to. So what I would do is this. I'm going to have you introduce yourself to our audience, Chris. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do at BenQ, your role at, the ICC, the board you sit on, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Art. It's very nice to be here. I feel so privileged to be the first guest in your studio, and it's a dream to become true, okay? So thanks for inviting me here. About myself, I think you have done a very good job for introducing me, and then I think one thing I need to mention is I'm the manager of the Color Technology Lab at BenQ, and so what I do is we set up the color standards at BenQ displays, also the projector as well. So we managed to have all the BenQ color standards, including the professional displays. For example, the SW series. So all the SW monitors, you see the colors that we managed to do all the color settings here. And also, the important stuff we're going to talk about today is that our new software. So that's what we're going to save that later for today, okay? And I like to point it out how I got into this color business. I don't share a lot with people around me, okay? So it is actually photography got me into this color world. Okay, back in the old days when the first DSLR come into this world, everybody's so excited, including me. But then I immediately find out that the color doesn't match either to my prints or on the monitors. It doesn't match at all.
Right, and I think that's something that many of our customers who use BenQ product are also having some of those problems as well. So, I mean, it's amazing to have someone on the other end to really solve these problems out so that when it really comes down to just, for example, choosing a good photography display, I mean, BenQ SW is really one that will help you solve a lot of those problems that you have on your daily workflow regarding color matching, but I'll have you continue.
Sure. So at that time, there wasn't a lot of information about color management or color science at all.
Right.
Right. So I tried to dig out some information and I put together some pieces together. So I found out there is a subject called color science. And there was information to tell us how you can get something done to make it more consistent color workflow. And so I tried that and somehow it works. And then I guess, this should be a big problem in the future because right now we're facing this problem. And later on, I see a big role in the DSLR when you're capturing the images. So I think, if I run into this problem, right, everybody else will, especially for photographers, right? So then I decided then I should really study more. Mm-hmm. So I have my master's degrees done in the color science and also my PhD, right? So I spent like last 15 years to doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's really impressive. And yes, you can get a PhD in color science. It's actually a really cool degree. I want one myself, but I'm not disciplined enough to go back to school anymore. The other thing I want to mention too, and to tag on what Chris was saying, is that it's not a matter of if you're going to run into a color matching issue, it's just a matter of when you're going to run into that issue. And I think that's something that a lot of photographers will find out at some point. And I know you mentioned a lot about DSLR because that's where, digital really start to play a big role. But now we're moving to mirrorless, and the same problems that were in the DSLR days also still carry over to the mirrorless technology that we have today as well. So just because we have moved the technology a little bit, or the technology advances, it doesn't necessarily mean that those problems are no longer there. They are there. And the best way to really just solving this problem out is just knowledge and getting a good piece of equipment to work with.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's why BenQ has so focused on the color itself. So that's why we have this color technology lab here. And then I think this really helps our customer to tackle their daily problems as well. So we're here to help as well. So Art is also willing to help our customers.
Yeah, I help you guys all the time. I mean, You guys know, I reply to your comments, all of my comments. I get DMs, I reply to emails on any help with PME. So you guys know you can always come to me as a resource, in addition to BenQ support, obviously. So that's always the case. But let's shift gear a little bit. So thank you for introducing yourself and giving our viewer a little bit more background about what you do at BenQ. And by the way, I also want to add that this is the main reason. And in fact, it's not really this. It says he is the main reason why I am still BenQ ambassador, because even though, I'll simply put it this way, other brands may have color labs and so forth, they do not have the color expertise that Chris has. And that's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. And when we talk about these color expertise, I want to clarify a little bit more that these are the color standard and the calibration standard that's defined on the monitor and the factory calibration, not so much the calibration that happens on the user end, on the individual computer. These are more just the standard that, it's more the industry standard. When you take the display out of the box, you get good color. That's thanks to Chris right here. All right. So simply put, I think that this is going to be an amazing year for color management, color control in general. And I'll put it this way, it's going to start with BenQ. And Chris already mentioned this. There's a new software that BenQ is working on. And this is something that BenQ has been working on to calibrate SUV display. In fact, some of you may have seen a glimpse of this software because BenQ have submitted the graphic user interface to a IF Design Award, and they did won that award, but there's very little conversation about this software. So what I want to do is introduce us to BenQ brand new calibration software for SUV display, and that's called Palette Master Ultimate. And there's really a lot to talk about this particular new software for BenQ. So this is going to be more of a Q&A, why BenQ is developing this, why they decide to really introduce a new software altogether and not just update, for example, Palette Master Element, how these whole things are going to work together. And then what we're going to do is we'll have another separate video running through the calibration process with Palette Master Ultimate, just to show you the new capabilities in the new program. But for now, we're just going to have an overall look at this new program. Now, a little secret is that I have been testing the alpha and also the beta version of this software. And even though it's still in beta, it's been running extremely well across multiple machines. In fact, I have tested it on Intel Macs. I have tested it on Apple Silicon on every single variant, both M1 and M2. And I've been spending a lot of hours testing this, but they do work really well. So we're going to start out with this question. So in a few sentences, or just give us an overview of how you would sum up Palette Master Ultimate.
I'll try my best to sum it up, okay? First of all, this is a brand new piece of software that BenQ develops it. And then it's really fast, accurate piece of calibration software, and it's a feature rich, and also it's very easy for user to use. So the user interface is brand new. It looks really cool and stylish, right? So it's very stable, okay? I think we gathered that information from the forums, from user feedbacks that PME, Palette Master Element, was somewhat a little bit, has some bugs in their every time we release, there's some bugs. So we try to fix that. But I think we do a lot of improvement over on the PMU. So that's a major improvement over PMU over PME.
Gotcha.
So we want, the bottom line is that we want our customers to do regular calibration on our SW monitors, but then we want them to have the ultimate experience on this calibration process. So this is the way we want to design this piece of software.
And just to note something about frequent calibration, you should always strive to calibrate your display, I would say about every 2 to 4 weeks or so.
Yes.
So even though these are LED backlight, they're way more stable. With every single piece of technology, they do slightly shift over time. And being able to maintain that consistency, that accuracy is, you know, a keystone in photography. Now, another thing that I also understand as well is BenQ have taken Palette Master Ultimate and brought the development in-house, right?
Right.
So tell me more about that. Like, what can you share about, you know, Palette Master Ultimate, like an overview, why, you know, just kind of like why did you guys decide to, you know, bring this development and go vertical with PMU?
Okay. The reason why we try to bring up this in-house development is that, like I said before, that we gather a lot of user feedbacks from all around the world. And then we gather these feedbacks and the user are asking a lot of demands. They want faster, accurate calibration. They want something less, more stable, okay? And then they're asking more features. And when we think about this, we put together these demands and we figure out that rather than modify something we have right now, it's better that we forge a completely new software, okay? And we have to do it in-house. This way we can pull the resource together, and in-house, that means we know the display better. So we can do a lot more feature development in-house. So that's why we decided to go this way, to do the in-house development. Although it takes longer, okay, it took us like 6 years to develop this software, okay? So we did a lot of planning at first, and we did our user research for like, what do you want? How do you want to operate this? Like, how do you want this user interface to be designed? What kind of features you want? Okay, this all done in the user research phases. And then we develop our algorithm from ground up. Like, we started from scratch, okay, from nothing. And we developed the algorithm. And then we integrated very nicely with our displays, the SW displays. So yeah, I think at a later stage, Art would do a very nice review of the PMU.
Yeah, we'll do a whole walkthrough again on my channel. You know that's coming when the software is released.
Yeah, so you'll know how the improvements are, and you know how accurate, how fast PMU will become later on.
So overall, as just a rough idea in general, you know, just across multiple different SW models, how much faster is PMU, would you say, on, you know, just a calibration in general?
Okay, on the latest SW, it will be like, you can save up to 40% of the time for the calibration. So that's a huge improvement. That's
quite significant. And let me just put it this way. The current Palette Master element with SW, it's really not a slouch piece of software either. It does calibration fairly fast, but if you can even like get a good calibration even that much faster, I mean, it will save you a lot of time. And this is one of those big things that BenQ is doing to encourage more frequent calibration, because you're not sitting in front of your computer for that long. It just takes less time. So you mentioned that PMU has a faster calibration. Is this a entirely new calibration process that BenQ come up with, and how is BenQ achieving this? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, this is a very good question. Yes, this is a new process that we came up with from the last 6 years. So basically what we did is start with whatever data we have measured from the lab, and then we adjust that using that difference so we can have a quicker and a faster calibration.
because BenQ developed the display, BenQ understands the display and how the color is supposed to be produced. So let's say, for instance, take an SW270C like the one that I have here. Essentially, you guys have multiple of these in your lab, and you already measure the base data of how this display is supposed to look and output color,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And knowing this, each individual SW display model would also output the color differently because, again, the LCD panel, the backlight, and all these technologies, that's why there's always variation between displays. But what BenQ is doing is setting up a standard set of data based on the models that they have, knowing the display best because they're the one who actually made it, who designed everything. And what they're doing is using that set of data as the base for calibration. So anytime the user runs the calibration, that base set of data is already there. So what you're really doing is adjusting the difference between what your computer can output. So this is accommodating for your computer output for any variance in the display that comes out from the factory floor. And that's how you're achieving the faster speed and also the more consistent calibration throughout.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a really cool process. In fact, that's a really, I would say, ingenious way of approaching calibration because, I mean, if we have done calibration before, most of the time it starts from the ground up. There's a whole set of colors that we have to go through. Ooh, and speaking of color patches, are we still looking at like a large color patch like we've done before, or is there any more or less? Can you give us some insight on that?
Usually, we try to measure less color patches in our software, so that saves more time.
Gotcha. And because BenQ is running this off of a base data already, so you don't really have to worry. It's like, oh, I mean, the first time you run it, you may see less color patches being measured, but it's not that it's going to provide a worse result. In fact, it's going to help you provide a better result because there is that base data model that's already there. And like I said, this is something really great that's going to benefit a lot of customers. So let's take the question this way. So we talk about PMU, Palette Master Ultimate, and we know that PME is still the software that's currently being used today. This is being introduced alongside with PME. That's my understanding, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So how would you position these two software together, Palette Master Element and Palette Master Ultimate? Like what's the goal here or what models and those kind of ideas? Like where would they go in parallel and where they may diverge?
Okay. So actually PMU Master Ultimate will actually support the current model like in the line.
Okay.
For and also the future SW models.
Okay.
Okay. But PME will actually will continue support for the current models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. And you heard it from BenQ himself that future SW models. So yeah, there's display coming. BenQ doesn't tell me anything, but it's always great to hear in the conversation. So we may get some exciting news. So there's one more thing I want to talk about, and this is probably one of the most mundane things that happen. But in my testing of a software, one thing that I note is that PMU, unlike PME or any other software, it does the validation in session, meaning that you put the calibrator on the display, it runs the calibration, and it just does the validation automatically. So that's really another feature that will save you time, will give you the delta E result on your display right away. But I know that BenQ have also done a lot of improvement in the validation process too. What can you tell me about that?
Right. The reason why we put the validation process with the calibration process is that we want to make sure that our calibration is perfect. Okay, we want to show you that, but we put the validation process like right after the calibration. So you don't need to click another button to validate calibration. So one less hassle for our users.
Gotcha.
And what we did for the validation is that we improve our color patches. Like in PME, there's only like less than 20 patches, right? So basically there are grayscale and RGB patches. For some people, that's not enough for them to see that the patches.
Right. I
validate
think that's
the
always
display.
been one of the features that
Right.
was requested out of PME to validate more patches. So I think you're getting your request answered in this one.
So in our PMU software, we add more color patches, like for darker red, green, and blues. So those are difficult patches for the displays. So in that case, you can see our PMU has done a really good job in those areas that we can successfully calibrate it and also have a good performance of those color patches. So this is for now, at this phase, this is what we did for the validation. But later on, that this is not finished. Like our work is not done yet. PMU will be continuously evolve, okay? So we have like version 2, version 3 coming out later, and more validation patches will follow up. So for example, the ICC standard, ISO standard, FOGRA, G7, Ideal Alliance standards, color patches will coming out later on.
Gotcha.
You'll have more variations to choose from. Oh, I forgot to mention the Macbeth color checker chart will be on.
That's the color checker classic if you're unfamiliar with Macbeth. But if you know what Macbeth is, you know that they're one of the best color calibration, standard company out there. So just a quick background on that. ArtIsRight took over Macbeth, and now the color checker chart, the color checker classic, I can't speak, is being produced by Calibrators at this point. So ArtIsRight have transitioned that entire product line to Calibrators. So if you're looking to get one to use those would be the Calibrators color checker at this point in time. And just based on what you're telling me right now, talking about the software a little bit, talking about future versions. So when your customers would get their hands on this is not a beta software, right? This is pretty much ready to go. It's version 1, it's full-fledged. You've run all the testing already. So there's no beta testing for the user part. No, there's no beta testing. It'll be full release for this software. And I guess your next question will be when, right? Yes, you read my mind. So if you can give me some insight into that, that would be great. I think many of us probably want to know too, because some of us may have seen the preview of like the design, everything, but I mean, let me simply put it this way. There's probably very few people who have actually run the calibration outside of BenQ. In fact, I'm probably going to venture a guess that I might be the only one that's been testing this extensively outside of BenQ HQ. Yes, I can guarantee that. Yes. There we go. The release timeline will be the middle of May this year. Okay. So it's coming soon. So yeah, you'll be able to get a chance to use this software really soon, and I'll have guides and everything. In fact, we're gonna do a quick walkthrough together in a separate video, so I highly encourage you following my channel just for that. One more thing that I want to mention before we wrap up this Q&A session with Chris is that in my testing, I've tested both on Mac and PC, and the one thing that I can tell you is that the software, Palette Master Ultimate, will carry the parity between both Mac and PC, meaning that on the Mac version, you're not getting like an Atom app, you're not getting like a cut down version. They will both be full-fledged feature calibration software. And this is something that I will tell you right now that many other hardware calibration display companies don't do. For example, they'll develop full-fledged window program, you got everything, but when it comes to Mac, there's like a lot of cut down features. What I can tell you right now, I ran the test on both platforms, and this is going to be a full parity. So that's another thing too that I always want to mention here, because Palette Master Element was that way. Palette Master Ultimate will be exactly the same. This brings us up to the end. Anything else you'd like to add about PMU or anything else at all? Well, I just hope people like it, and thank you very much for testing it out for us. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and think it will give you a very good experience for calibration. And of course, if you have any recommendation or comments or any feedbacks to us, we're all welcome for that. And I think Art will be a really good channel to come through it. Yeah, so just a few thoughts about the feedback thing. Usually when you guys comment on my videos or you contact me about some of the questions or issues you may be having, these feedback do trickle down or trickle up to BenQ. I'm close friends with Chris, so we talk all the time, so I'll share with him these things. The other thing too is that every time you contact support and you run into an issue, those feedback do go back to BenQ, and that's how BenQ has been gathering data. So even though you may think like support may not help you, it's sometimes a good idea just to contact support, because this way they can really log the bug that may be happening and send the feedback up properly to BenQ so they can resolve these issues for you. But I think that brings us to the end of this Palette Master Ultimate reveal and Q&A video, right? Yes. So that's about it. Anyway, if you have any questions or comment about any of these at all, leave them in the comment section below. I'll answer as much as I can. Give this video a like if you're new. Please subscribe and hit on the notification bell, and as always, in Art we trust.